Hey everyone, in today's video, I'm going to be doing a board and batten accent wall in our master bedroom. As you can see, the bedroom feels a little bit cold. There's nothing on the walls, so I'm going to do a fun, quick and easy accent wall. I'm going to show you guys all how to do it. This is a fairly easy project that requires minimal tools and anyone can do it. As you can see, I just moved some of the furniture in this room so that I have access to this back wall. This is where I'm going to be working on the accent wall, and we are going to build it 5.5 foot tall, and we're going to do a board and batten style. You could build this all the way to the ceiling, choose a different height. The process is going to be the same, but I'm going to show you guys all the steps. For this project, the tools are fairly basic. You are going to need a brad nailer. I recommend an 18 gauge brad nailer. And I recommend using 1.5 to 2 inch nails. Grab yourself a bunch of extras. And then a stud finder will be helpful. We definitely need a tape measure. I've got some filler and caulking for after we're finished the job. And we definitely need a level to make our lines and keep our board straight. I've got a 6 footer and a 4 footer. You can do the whole thing with a 4 foot level if that's all you have. The first thing that we have to do is figure out our total width of the wall that we're going to be working on. It's easiest to do this with somebody else and have them hold the tape measure, but I'm going to show you how you can do it on your own. Basically, take your tape and we want to come to a round even number. So I'm going to extend this to 100 inches and I'm going to make a mark. I'll bring the camera in and show you guys. So as you can see, I have 100 inches here and I made a mark. So now I can take my tape and I can measure from this side of the wall and I can just add on. As you can see, we're at 84 1/8 inch. So we want to add that onto 100 inches. So we have 184 1/8 for our total width. Here's a look at the material that I'm going to be using. This is flat stock MDF trim and it is 3.5 inches wide. You can get different widths of this trim, 2.5, 2 3/4, 3.5, 5.5. So whatever width you choose, we're going to use in our formula to figure out the spacing, but I'll be using 3.5 inch. The only other thing is try to buy it in whatever length is going to give you the least amount of waste. I bought 12 footers because that's going to work out the best for me and give me the least amount of waste. All right, now I'm going to show you guys how we can calculate to get equal spacing for whatever length wall you have and whatever thickness board you have. There's a pretty simple formula here, and it is the total wall length, which in our case is 184.125, which is 184 1/8, and we're going to minus that by our board width, which is 3.5 inches. Once we get that number, we can divide it by the total number of spaces. So as you can see, I drew this out for 10 spaces. So we're going to plug this into our calculator and see what our number comes out at. 184.125 minus 3.5 equals 180.625. Divide that by 10, which equals 18 1/16. Our spacing came out to 18 1/16. That is going to be from the start of one board to the start of the next board. Next, we want to lay it out and make sure we're going to avoid our receptacles. If our boards are going to come down and hit a receptacle, adjust this by increasing or decreasing the number of spaces so you can increase the width or decrease the width between the boards to miss your receptacles. Next, as you can see, we have baseboard. You can either remove the baseboard and install your piece of flat stock along the bottom, or you can keep the baseboard on you can put this over top of your existing baseboard so that you have a nice square edge, or you can just leave it off and use your existing baseboard as your bottom piece. Here, I'm going to install this over top of our baseboard so that we have a nice uniform board for our vertical pieces to come down and hit. Next, we're going to decide how high up on this wall we want to come. You could go all the way to the ceiling, come up 4 foot. We're going to go 5.5 feet up. So we're going to take our tape measure and we are going to mark 5.5 feet on our wall, which equals 66 inches. So I'm going to place a mark there at 5.5 feet. And then the next thing we want to do is draw a nice level line all the way across our wall. So we're going to take our level, and this bubble in the middle is going to show us when it is level. So to come in here, once you have the bubble perfectly in the middle, draw a line on your wall and then move downward, making sure that you overlap your level, and then continue on and mark your line all the way across the wall, ensuring that you remain level the entire way. Now that we've got our level line drawn across at the height that we want, I like to take a stud finder and mark all of our studs so that we can nail this board into the studs. This stud finder that I'm using shows a red light when you're on a stud. Every time I hit a stud, I'm placing a piece of painter's tape on the wall and marking both sides where the stud is and putting an S. You can use any stud finder to do this. The one I'm using is a pretty cheap model. The stud finders are pretty good at recognizing what is a stud. A simple way to confirm it, these should be spaced out 16 inches on center. So if you grab your tape measure, all of these red squares are 16s. You can take it, line it up, and if the red circles are in the middle of your marks, you know that those are studs because they're lining up at 16-inch centers. Another way you can confirm if it's a stud, you can knock on the wall. If it sounds hollow and then all of a sudden becomes solid, where the solid sound is, that's where your stud is. So just confirm that you actually do have your studs in the right place, and we'll mark them all the way down. As you can see, this board isn't long enough to span the entire width of the wall. So I'm going to show you how you can join two boards together to make the joint invisible and so that it never separates. What you want to do is mark the last stud on the board that it spans to. Here's a look at my saw, and we want to change it so it's on a 45-degree bevel. So back here, we can loosen that up, which allows us to tilt the saw to cut on a 45-degree angle. Now I've got the board that I marked. I'm going to cut this on the 45. So there's a look at our cut. We've got a 45-degree angle, and the next piece we'll cut on a 45 as well so that we can join them together just like that. Now I'm going to make sure the board is tight against the side wall, and touching that line that we drew along the top, I'm going to put a nail into one of the studs and then just double check with my level to ensure that it's level, and then I'll put a few more nails into the studs. Board that we nailed along the top of the wall, as you can see, it is flush with that line that we drew, and I put a level on it just to make sure it was nice and level. You can see where we cut that 45 is right in the middle of a stud. Now I'm going to take my tape measure, rest it against this wall, and I'm going to come across and get my measurement, which to the long point is 41 7/8. For that measurement, we want to come 41 7/8 to the long point. So I want to make a mark here, and we want to miter it so the long point is we're going to cut in from there. Never hurts to cut this piece a little bit longer. You can always shave off more material if it's too long, but if you cut it too short, you can't add material to it. So we've got 41 7/8 inch marked. We're cutting on a 45, and we've got our long point measured. So I'm gonna come down here, use my eye to line this up, making sure that I'm exactly where I want. Just like that, I made my cut, and I've left myself a little bit of excess. So there's the 45 that we want, and now we can take this and install it. I always add wood glue to my joint. This is going to hold it together and make sure that it never separates, and then put the piece on top. Make sure that you have a nice tight joint that's perfectly lined up, and then you want to fire a couple nails through the joint that are going to go into the stud. Now that we've got the horizontal top piece installed, we can do the exact same on the bottom. And again, you want to joint them on a 45 over a stud so that that joint is never going to separate. Here's a little trick for the bottom so that you don't have to mark all your studs. Just come straight down and place your tape measure at the first stud. Next, all you have to do is look for your red square where the next 16-inch center is, and you can fire nails into all the studs this way easier. Now that we've got our top piece and our bottom piece nailed on, we fired nails into all the studs. Next we can start, I'm going to start on this left hand side, and I'm going to get my measurement and then go cut that piece, and we can start installing our vertical pieces. To measure this, we're going to place our tape measure on the top of the bottom piece, and we're going to measure to the bottom of the top piece. So our measurement is 53 1/4, which I'll go cut. Back to the miter saw, I'm going to mark my measurement, and then I can make this cut. Again, it never hurts to make your cut a little bit longer and then test the piece to make sure it fits. Like I said before, you can't add material to it if you cut it too short. I just cut this first piece, and it's a snug fit, but it fits really good. Something that I like to do to make this quicker, instead of measuring each individual piece, if you remember, my layout is 18 1/16 of an inch. So I'm going to measure across to where my next board is going to be, and I will place a mark. So I made a mark at 18 1/16. Then, using the board I cut plus a level, putting the level on the side, I can look at the bubble and make sure that this is straight up and down. And then I can see if this piece, the measurement that I cut there, will be the exact same for our next board. Sometimes your floors dip or have humps in, and you may have different measurements going all the way down. So it looks like I'm about a 1/16 inch longer for this next piece. So I'm going to add that onto my measurement for the next piece. Now we can go back and install that first piece of trim. I like to put a brad nail at the top, one at the bottom, and then two in the middle. And then remember, we want to make sure our spacing is correct. So we marked 18 1/16 of an inch. I made a mark. I'm going to grab my next piece of trim. Using a level, I'm going to put the level on the side of the trim and make sure that the vertical bubble is in the middle. And then I'll put 4 nails into this piece as well, and repeat this process all the way down the wall. The way that I'm installing these boards by only making a mark on the top and using my level can be a little tricky, so I'm going to bring the camera in and walk you guys through this to make sure your installation is perfect. I'm going to bring the camera in and show you how I install this next board, just so you can make sure you're doing the same yourself. So again, our measurement is 18 1/16 from the start of one board to the start of the next. So I'm going to hook my tape measure on, and I'm going to mark out 18 1/16 from the start of one to the start of the next. Then I'm going to take my board and I'm going to line it up so the edge is right on that mark, and then I'll take my level, and I want to make it so that this bubble is in the middle. So I need to adjust this just like that. I've got the bubble in the middle, and now I can nail this on. I'm going to put a nail up near this joint, just like that. And then I'm going to put a nail in the middle. One down there. And then again, I want to nail right near this joint, because when I put some caulking or filler on that joint, I can easily fill that nail hole at the same time. Now just continue on making all your measurements, cutting your pieces, and installing them in the exact same manner. It's no rush, so take your time. This will help minimize any mistakes, and as long as you follow that formula, you should have even spacing all the way down along your wall. As you can see, I've got the entire wall done. We've got equal spacing between each of the boards. Next thing I want to do is fill all the nail holes, caulk all the gaps along the side as well. Make it so you can't see any of those. I'm using this spackling product from DAP. There's tons available at most hardware stores, and I'm just using it to fill the joints on the vertical and horizontal boards and all the nail holes. Now that we've got all of our nail holes filled, we want to caulk all of the joints, especially these verticals and the horizontals. So I'm using a latex-based caulking. Do not use silicone. That stuff is terrible to work with, and it's meant for wet areas like showers. So get yourself a latex paintable caulking. And one tip I always recommend is cut this on a 45-degree angle. That way you can kind of press the tip of the caulking tube in, and it's going to help you get a nice clean bead. I just use a standard caulking gun. There's so many available. Purchase whatever you think is going to be best for you, and then apply your caulking. And if you put too much on, you can always go over it with your finger and wipe away any excess to get a nice clean finish. Once the filler is dried, grab some sandpaper. I recommend 120 grit, and you can go over and sand all the areas that you filled to get them nice and smooth.